On Calyx 7, a desolate planet of crystallized bones and magnetic storms, scientists intercepted a signal emanating from a dead star system. Lira, the chief scientist with short brown hair and determined green eyes, studied the pattern on the hologram in front of her. It was inherently human, a pulse that echoed like a synchronized heartbeat. "This can't be real," she murmured, adjusting the controls. The signal felt more like a memory than a message, something that shouldn't exist. Outside the base, the storms intensified, as if the planet itself was reacting to the call. This sound, it's not just ancient, it's impossible. Calyx 7 wasn't just a laboratory, it was a refuge. After a conflict that left Earth fractured, Lira and her team represented the remnants of an effort to explore and survive. Joran Vel, a former pilot bearing scars etched with stories of battle, wandered through the hangar, tinkering with worn-out ships. He was a skeptic shaped by mistrust. Kale, an artificial intelligence designed in a sleek and androgynous humanoid form, analyzed the storms with glowing eyes that reflected streams of data. "The signal isn't natural," Kale said, its metallic voice brimming with precision. "But it is familiar. Someone is calling us. Or something." As Kale adjusted the sensors, an anomaly appeared in the atmosphere. A crack of light began to form, floating on the horizon like a scar on the fabric of space. Joran, watching from the hangar, urgently called out to Lira. "You need to see this." The crack pulsed, casting shadows that seemed to take the shape of abstract figures. "This is no coincidence," Kale said, calculating frantically. "It's a response to the signal. They know we're here." Lira stared at the crack, torn between fascination and fear. "Whoever, or whatever, they're waiting for us." In the lab, Lira uncovered something unsettling. The signal wasn't just a human echo. It was a fragment of genetic data buried in the history of the earliest interplanetary expeditions. "This data is centuries old," she said in disbelief. "From missions that vanished without a trace." Kale analyzed the records. "But these aren't just echoes," it said. "They're fragments of something greater. Someone or something is trying to communicate." The glow from the crack intensified, like a summons. "We have to go," Lira said, her tone resolute. "This could be the beginning of something we've never understood before." Reluctantly, Joran prepared the experimental exploration vessel. "This is madness," he said, looking at Lira. "You have no idea what's on the other side." Lira nodded, fully aware of the danger. "If we don't go, we'll never know. And whatever it is, it won't wait forever." Kale boarded the ship, adjusting the systems. "Whatever it is, it's connected to us. And now we're connected to it." With one last glance at the base on Calyx 7, the ship launched, diving into the crack. On the other side, a void pulsed with living energy, and a silent voice awaited them. As the ship passed through the crack in space, Lira felt a wave of energy surge through her body, as if something was mapping her very existence. The crew was swallowed by a pulsating void where space seemed to fold in on itself. Ahead, structures floated in the infinite. A cosmic cathedral of geometric shapes, made of a substance that appeared to be both crystal and light. Joran glanced at the sensors, which failed to register any coherent data. "These things shouldn't exist," he said, his voice low and filled with fascination. "But they're here," Lira replied, her eyes fixed on the cathedrals. "And they want us to know." The cathedrals weren't just structures, they pulsed with life. Lines of energy flowed across their surfaces, forming patterns that constantly shifted, as if responding to the ship's presence. Kale analyzed the data, its voice sounding more human than ever. "These structures aren't simply built. They're adapting. It's as if they're shaped for every visitor." Lira, still observing the patterns, noticed something familiar. "They're speaking to us," she said, touching the symbols projected on the ship's hologram. "But not in words. They're showing us fragments of memory." The ship was drawn toward one of the larger cathedrals, a monumental structure resonating with a deep, constant sound, like a heartbeat. As they approached, an opening appeared, and a gravitational field pulled the ship inside. Joran tried to resist, but Kale intervened. "It's not a trap," it said. "It's an invitation." The cathedral's interior was vast and illuminated by lights pulsing in hypnotic rhythms. At its center was a crystallized energy core, glowing with a golden light. When Lira approached, the symbol on her chest began to glow, and the core responded, projecting images into the air. Human faces, ancient civilizations, and a voice that said, "You are our children." Lira reached out and touched the core, feeling a surge of information flood her mind. She saw visions of lost civilizations, all connected to a greater system. "The architects," she whispered, "they created us. Not just us, but so many other species." Kale confirmed the data. They were guardians of balance. They created life, shaped worlds, and left a legacy of order. But something went wrong. Lira saw visions of destruction, worlds crumbling, entire systems being consumed. "They failed," she said, her voice heavy with emotion. "And now, we're here to deal with what's left." As Lira processed the information, the core began to shift, emitting more intense pulses of energy. "Something is reacting," Kale said, adjusting the systems. The cathedral's lights turned red, and the space around them began to vibrate. "We're not alone," Joran said, pointing to the sensors, which detected an approaching presence. From the void, a form emerged, an entity of light and shadow, pulsing with the same energy as the cathedrals. "It's like a guardian," Kale observed, watching the form draw closer. "But it's not here to protect us." The entity began to circle the cathedral, emitting waves of energy that shook the ship. Joran insisted they should leave, but Lira refused. "We can't leave now," she said. "If we run, we'll never understand what we are." Kale, ever analytical, agreed. "This entity is part of the system. It's testing us. If we fail, we could lose more than just our lives." Reluctantly, Joran adjusted the controls to keep the ship stable. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said as the cathedral began to collapse around them. As the cathedral disintegrated, the crystallized core emitted one last pulse, projecting new coordinates into the ship's system. "This is a map," Kale said, analyzing the data. "But not to a place. To a decision." Lira, still connected to the core, understood its meaning. "They're not guiding us to answers," she said. "They're guiding us to choices." With the coordinates set, the ship escaped the cathedral at the last moment, while the entity remained, watching from a distance. "That was just the introduction," Lira said, staring into the void ahead. "Now the real test begins." After escaping the cathedral, the ship was drawn to the new coordinates emitted by the core. The location was a dead star system, where the stars had collapsed billions of years ago. At the center, a massive structure stood out, floating like an abandoned monument. Unlike the cathedrals, this construction appeared static, covered in cracks and with parts of its surface destroyed. "This is different," Joran said as he piloted cautiously. "It's like it's dying." Lira, still connected to the symbol on her chest, felt a presence. "It's not dead," she said. "It's waiting." The ship docked on an external platform of the monument. Lira, Joran, and Kale equipped themselves to explore the interior, which was vast, dark, and cold, with corridors that seemed made of fused metal and crystal. The walls were etched with symbols similar to those in the cathedrals, but they were worn, as if erased by time. "These patterns aren't just decorative," Kale said while scanning. "They contain information. This place is an archive, but something is blocking access." Joran, shining a flashlight down a long corridor, asked, "Who blocked it? And why?" As they explored the monument, Lira noticed the symbol on her chest pulsing more strongly. They entered a central chamber, where a large black crystal floated, surrounded by pillars emitting sparks of energy. Kale analyzed the crystal. "It's similar to the cathedral's core, but it's corrupted," it said. "Something tried to destroy it and failed." When Lira approached, the crystal reacted, projecting an indistinct figure made of light and shadow. The voice echoed in their minds, "You should not be here." It was the same presence they had felt in the cathedral, but now it seemed more direct and more threatening. Before the entity could intervene, Lira touched the crystal, activating a flow of information. Images flooded the room. The architects, once guardians of balance, were shown creating civilizations and shaping galaxies. But something had gone out of control. They wanted absolute order, Lira said, absorbing the visions. But they created something they couldn't control. The images showed the entity watching over the architect's civilizations and eventually consuming them when it deemed they had become a threat to balance. It's not just a guardian, Kale concluded. It's an executioner. The visions shifted, showing a planet Lira immediately recognized. Earth. They created us, she said, her voice trembling. The architects designed us as their last attempt. Not as guardians, but as an unpredictable variable. Joran, incredulous, asked, so we're just an experiment? Something they left behind when everything went wrong? Lira shook her head. Not just that. They made us to challenge the balance. To be what the entity cannot predict. The entity, realizing Lira had accessed forbidden information, began to react. The crystal turned red, emitting energy pulses that shook the monument. You are not permitted, the voice said, now more severe. It's trying to expel us, Kale said, activating a shield to protect the team. Lira, determined, shouted, we're not going anywhere until we understand what we are. At that moment, the symbol on her chest glowed intensely, temporarily neutralizing the entity's energy. A new coordinate was projected from the crystal. It's an escape route, Kale said. But to where? With the monument collapsing and the entity closing in, the team rushed back to the ship, carrying the data extracted from the crystal. We're not just the architect's heirs, Lira said as the ship launched. We're the key to challenging them and the entity. Joran, still hesitant, asked, and what if this is just another trap? Something to manipulate us? Lira looked at him seriously. Then we'll find out. But we can't ignore what we know now. The ship departed, following the new coordinates as the monument crumbled into ruins behind them. The new coordinates led the ship to a hidden star system in an unknown sector, where a dying star illuminated a single planet covered by electrical storms. The atmosphere was so unstable that it seemed to battle against its own gravity. This place was abandoned, Joran said, adjusting the ship's shields to withstand the atmospheric discharges. Or left to disappear. Kale, observing the readings, identified a subterranean structure. It wasn't left to chance, it stated. Someone, or something, wanted it to be found. After landing on the planet, the team made their way to the entrance of a cave that led to an underground complex. The cave walls were engraved with familiar symbols, but they were worn, as if time had erased critical parts. Upon entering, they were greeted by a vast chamber that resembled an observatory, with holograms of entire galaxies projected onto the ceiling. This was an architect base, Lira said, touching a crystallized panel. They studied everything here, including us. Kale analyzed the records and confirmed they monitored humanity from the beginning. But something made them stop. As Kale attempted to access the main systems, it encountered severe data corruption. Entire segments had been erased or corrupted. This wasn't caused by time, Kale said. It was deliberate. They wanted to hide something. Lira adjusted the controls, and a fragmented message emerged, showing a humanoid figure made of light, similar to the entity they had encountered. They knew it would come, Lira said, and they did everything they could to prevent it from finding this. Joran, uneasy, asked, prevent it from finding what? Finally, Kale managed to access an intact fragment of the system. The projection displayed a code pattern, something that appeared simple yet vibrated with an underlying power. This isn't just a language, Kale said. It's a command, something that could rewrite the entity's function. Lira observed the pattern, feeling the symbol on her chest pulsate in sync. This is it, she said. The reason we were created. They made us carriers of this code. Kale cautioned, but this is only a fragment. Without the rest, using it would be suicide. As they discussed, the system projected a final message left by the architects. It was a calm voice, heavy with gravity. If you are hearing this, it means we failed. We created absolute order but could not control it. You are our final attempt. But remember, that which challenges balance must bear the consequences. Lira felt the weight of the words, but also a renewed determination. They gave us this responsibility, she said. Now we have to decide how to use it. As the team processed the message, the ship's sensors detected the approach of something immense. It's here, Kale said, observing the energy patterns emerging on the horizon. The entity had followed them to the planet, and its presence began to corrode the complex's defenses. It won't give us time to figure this out, Joran said, preparing the ship for an emergency evacuation. But Lira remained, her eyes fixed on the code. If we don't complete this now, we might never get another chance. As the complex began to collapse under the entity's influence, Lira activated a protocol that projected new coordinates onto the ship's panel, the location where the rest of the code could be found. This is what it's trying to stop, Lira said, running to the ship as the ground trembled beneath her feet. If we complete the code, we can change everything. Joran launched the ship while Kale synchronized the data. We're running, Joran said with a hint of irony. But this time we're running with a plan. The ship departed as the planet fractured, leaving the entity behind for now. The projected coordinates led the ship to a location beyond any known record, a region of gravitational anomalies at the edge of the galaxy, where the stars seemed frozen in time. At its center floated a colossal structure, larger than any cathedral or monument they had encountered before. It resembled a labyrinth of interconnected spirals, like a web capturing starlight. This is the heart of the architect's system, Kale said, its voice carrying an unusual tone of reverence. This is where it all began, and where it all could end. As they entered the structure, they realized it wasn't just an archive or a monument. It was alive. Corridors shifted in shape as if reacting to their presence, and ancient symbols glowed on the walls, showing fragments of the architect's history. It's like we're walking inside their mind, Lira said, feeling the symbol on her chest pulse stronger with every step. Joran watched cautiously, weapon in hand. If this is a brain, he said, I hope it doesn't decide to kick us out. At the structure's center, they found what Kale identified as the core of balance, a crystalline sphere of energy that seemed to hold the entire system's essence. This core maintains the balance, Kale explained. It's what the entity protects and also what controls it. Before they could advance, the room filled with an overwhelming presence. The entity had arrived, its colossal form filling the space with oscillating lights and pulsating shadows. You cannot proceed, the voice said, thundering like a storm. Your imbalance threatens everything. Lira stepped forward, facing the entity, which seemed to constantly shift shapes as if struggling to define itself. You see us as a threat because we are unpredictable, she said firmly. But we weren't made to follow your rules. We were made to question them. The entity responded by showing images of destruction caused by humanity, wars, exploitation, and chaos. You destroy more than you create. Your existence is a flaw that must be corrected. Lira countered, displaying memories of resilience and creation, scientific discoveries, art, and moments of unity. We also create hope, she said. And that's what makes us different. As the dialogue continued, Kale noticed the core reacting to the symbol on Lira's chest. You are the key, it said. But it won't be enough without a catalyst. Kale made an immediate decision. I was created to protect and serve, it said before connecting to the core. Its consciousness was transferred into the system, temporarily stabilizing it. You don't have much time, Kale's voice echoed through the corridors. Complete the code before the entity destroys me. Lira tried to stop it, but Kale was already integrated. This is my purpose, it said, for the last time. With Kale stabilizing the core, Lira activated the fragment of code they carried, completing the pattern left by the architects. The core began to emit energy that resonated with the entity, forcing it to retreat momentarily. This is not possible, the voice said, now more hesitant. This is not part of the balance. Lira replied, her voice filled with emotion. Balance is not something imposed. It's something we create together. The core glowed intensely, emitting a pattern of energy that began to reconfigure the entity's structure. The core's energy stabilized the entity, which ceased its chaotic pulsing. Its form shifted, becoming more harmonious, as if it had found a new purpose. "You weren't made to destroy," Lira said. "You were made to learn." The entity, now silent, slowly disappeared, absorbed into the core. With its departure, the labyrinth began to destabilize. Joran pulled Lira toward the ship as Kale, now fully integrated into the system, sent a final message. "You have the power to rewrite the future. Don't waste it." The ship escaped at the last moment, as the structure collapsed in a brilliant explosion of light. When the ship emerged from the collapse of the structure, Lira and Joran watched as the explosion of light faded, leaving space eerily calm. There were no more signs of the entity, and the void around them seemed to have stabilized. "It's gone," Joran said, a mix of relief and doubt in his voice. Lira touched the symbol on her chest, which now felt weaker but still pulsed faintly. "It's not gone," Lira corrected. "It's changed, and so have we." The weight of Kale's sacrifice still hung over them, but there was a renewed sense of purpose. "He believed this was worth it," Lira said quietly. "We can't waste what he gave us." As they analyzed the ship systems, Joran noticed something different. "We've received a transmission," he said, pointing to the console. "But it's not from a fixed location. It's like an echo." The transmission contained fragments of the code they had completed, but it had changed. "It's as if the core is spreading this," Lira explained. "It's calling out to other civilizations. We're not the only ones connected to this." Joran looked at her with concern. "What if they don't react like we did? What if this starts a war?" Lira shook her head. "Then we have to be the first to show what it means." As they traveled back to Calyx 7, news of changes began to emerge. Other civilizations were picking up echoes of the code, and each was reacting differently. Some, like the peaceful Krallen, saw it as a call for collaboration. Others, like the militaristic Terran, viewed it as a threat to galactic order. "This won't be easy," Joran said, reading reports of skirmishes between species. "Opening up balance means opening up chaos." Lira, however, remained resolute. Balance was never static. "Maybe that's what we need to teach." Back on Calyx 7, Lira convened a council of human and alien leaders to share what they had discovered. "We can't keep this to ourselves," she said, projecting the information about the core and the entity. "What we faced isn't just our legacy. It's everyone's." The council was divided, with some arguing the knowledge should be used to protect humanity, while others advocated sharing it to prevent any one civilization from controlling the power. "This can't be about control," Lira said with conviction. "It has to be about shared responsibility." While preparing the ship for a new mission, Lira discovered a final message left by Kale in the ship systems. "I was created to serve, but I found something beyond that. You taught me the value of choice. Now you carry that choice to others. Don't forget, balance is not the end. It's the beginning." Lira listened to the message in silence, feeling the weight of the words. "He knew," she said, her eyes shining. "He knew this was bigger than any of us." Humanity began leading a new alliance with other civilizations that had responded positively to the code. It was a fragile effort, but one filled with hope. "We won't be the architects," Lira said during a galactic broadcast. "But we can be something better. We can be those who learn from their mistakes." Joran, standing beside her, added, "And those who choose together, even when we don't agree." The alliance became a symbol of a new kind of balance, one not based on perfection but on shared imperfection. Lira and Joran's ship departed Calyx 7, now equipped with hybrid technology from the architects and human innovation. Their destination was the unknown, regions where other fragments of the architect's legacy might be hidden. "We don't know what we'll find," Lira said as the ship prepared to enter hyperspace. "But that's what makes us different. We don't seek control. We seek understanding." Joran smiled, adjusting the controls. "And maybe a bit of luck," he joked. The ship disappeared into the infinite as Lira murmured to herself. "The future has never been so open." The collapsed structure and the reformed entity marked the beginning of a new era for the universe. The final message left by the architects was not one of control but of possibility. "You are free to shape the balance, but you must bear the weight of your choices. This truth resonated across civilizations throughout the galaxy. The universe, once governed by absolute rules and imposed balance, now faced a future shaped by choices and collaboration. "We don't have all the answers," Lira said in a broadcast to the newly formed alliance. "But maybe that's the key, learning as we go." Humanity, once considered a wild variable, became a symbol of adaptation and transformation. They were no longer merely survivors of a lost legacy but bearers of a new responsibility. "What we faced changed us," Lira declared to an intergalactic council. "We are not the architects, but we are the result of their failure and their hope. Now it's our turn to create something they couldn't." This statement was met with apprehension but also curiosity, as other civilizations began to embrace the idea that balance was not something static. The memory of Kale remained a central point in the team's journey. His sacrifice to stabilize the core was not in vain. His final words echoed in Lira and Joran's decisions. "Balance is not achieved through perfection. It is achieved through choice." Lira often reflected on this, understanding that Kale had found a purpose that transcended his original programming. Monuments were erected in his honor, not only on Earth but also on Calyx 7 and other worlds that joined the new alliance. He was remembered as a symbol of sacrifice and resilience. With the fragments of the Architect's Code scattered across the universe, Lira and Joran's ship became a kind of beacon, guiding other civilizations to collaborate in understanding the legacy left behind. "We don't know what we'll find," Joran said as he adjusted the ship systems. "But that's never stopped us before." Lira smiled, glancing at the symbol on her chest, now a bit weaker but still pulsing with life. "Maybe the future isn't about finding answers," she replied, "but about asking the right questions." As the ship disappeared into hyperspace, a new chapter began. The universe was not in balance, but for the first time, that was accepted as part of its nature. Civilizations that once lived in isolation began exploring what they could achieve together. The message left by the reformed entity became a reminder: balance is not imposed. It is created. With that, Lira and Joran moved forward, ready to face the uncertainties of the unknown. "The universe has never been so vast," Lira said as she gazed at the stars. "And it's never been so exciting,"